right, y'all. Welcome to the Scott Horton Show. I am the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of antiwar.com, author of the book Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and I've recorded more than 5,000 interviews going back to 2003, all of which are available at scotthorton.org. You can also sign up for the podcast feed. The full archive is also available at youtube.com/Scott Horton Show. All right, you guys, once again, we're joined on the phone by Nasser Arrabyee, reporter out of Sana'a, Yemen. Welcome back to the show. Nasser, how are you doing, sir?
Thank you very much for having me, Scott. Thank you very much for your interest in Yemen.
Yeah, well, it's the most important story in the world right now. More important even than the virus, although the virus is involved in this story too, of course. But let's start with the recent news. The Saudis said that they wanted a ceasefire, and yet the fighting has continued. But the talks have continued as well. And so I was wondering if you can give us an update on that aspect first here.
Well, Saudi announced the ceasefire from one side, and they did not even consult with Houthi about this ceasefire. So it is not existing on the ground at all. The war is continuing. The battles continue and intensify even stronger in many places, including the borders with Saudi Arabia, in Marib, Al-Jawf, and the south border with Saudi Arabia. So that ceasefire was more propaganda. It's like Saudis wanted to exploit the pandemic and the panic from the coronavirus, and they declared that unilateral ceasefire that did not exist even for 1 single minute. Or Houthi didn't even know and didn't respond to it, and even the Saudis themselves, they said that they did not consult with Houthis, and they never stopped the airstrikes. They never stopped the assaults, the offensives on the ground. So what we are seeing now is just war, stronger than it was, and what we are hearing is yes, that the Saudis are trying to engage with Houthis in official talks, in more official talks, but nothing is clear until now, because Saudis look at this as a sensitive issue, and they don't want to tell the world that they are looking for Houthis. But of course, what we heard from many sources is that the talks between Saudis and Houthis are still continuing, but making no progress so far. The most important thing is that the war is still there, and the battles are intensifying, and the airstrikes are continuing in many places, including Sana'a, of course, not only in the front lines.
Mm-hmm. And now, I mean, this has happened every time, right? Every few months or so, the Saudis declare a ceasefire, which gets them a lot of headlines, but then they just keep up the bombing campaign anyway. It never really means anything, does it?
Yes, it doesn't mean anything, especially this time, because it was more propaganda, because of the Western media went on talking that it was because of the coronavirus, and Saudi Arabia was the first one to respond to the UN Secretary General and all these things. But in fact, it was nothing, and it resulted in nothing. And I couldn't even say whether it held or not. I mean, it was not there. It didn't exist to say it held or not. So it was not there at all. It was only in the Saudi media only.
Yeah. Well, and now as far as the talks go, you said that they're making no progress, but what are even the parameters of the talks? What are they discussing? Is it anything like a real end to the war, or they're just nibbling around the edges here, or what?
Yeah, they are discussing the most important thing and the most controversial issues, like I mean the things that matters Saudi Arabia most are the borders and Iran and the ballistic missiles, as I told you many times in your show. So Saudi Arabia does not care about Yemenis being killed or Yemenis being starved or Yemeni infrastructure being destroyed or something like this at all. They don't care about this. Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman now, with all these problems around him, he wants to secure his border, and he wants also to make a buffer zone in the south border, and he wants also to see Houthis distancing themselves from Iran as much as possible. And the most important thing is that he wants to neutralize, if I can say, to neutralize the ballistic missiles and the powerful drones that become a real threat to Saudi Arabia. So, and this is, of course, not easy to. I mean, it would take a lot of time, and it's not easy for Houthi to say, okay, we will give you the ballistic missiles and we will give you the drones or something like this. So they are talking about these things. They are talking about these things. The most important things is the border, Saudi border, and the ballistic missiles and Iran. The most important things, not the other things about Yemenis forming a government or reconciliation among Yemenis or something like this is very, very secondary thing. It is not important for Saudis.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it seems like there are so many different factions. Even if they could work out some kind of compromise between the Houthis and the Hadi government, which seems impossible, they still have the Southern Transitional Council down there in Aden that wants no part of either, right?
Yes, the Hadi government is not one, as I told you. Hadi government is many factions. Houthi now is one faction, is one group, and united. Their places, the places under the control of Houthis, are more organized, and the governments are functioning, or the government's institutions are functioning even better than the places under Saudi and Emirati forces. The Saudis want, for example, to make a government just to tell them by phone what to do, 1, 2, 3, and but it's not easy to convince them. It's not easy to bring them united because they are first. Saudi Arabia is divided. They have their own problems with the Emirates, with the United Arab Emirates, and they want to share the influence on the ground and the things on the ground and everything on the ground by 50. But those who are under Houthi, under Saudis, are also many factions, and those who are under United Arab Emirates are many factions, and they are fighting now against each other, and they are turning against each other in Aden and in Hudaydah and in many places, and in Taiz, they never stop fighting.
Hey guys, Scott Horton here from Mike Swanson's great book, The War State. It's about the rise of the military-industrial complex and the power elite after World War II, during the administrations of Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, and Jack Kennedy. It's a very enlightening take on this definitive era on America's road to world empire. The War State by Mike Swanson. Find it in the right-hand margin at scotthorton.org. Hey y'all, Mike Swanson is a successful Wall Street trader with an Austrian school understanding of the markets, and therefore he has great advice to share with you. Check out Mike's work and sign up for his list at wallstreetwindow.com. And that's what you'll get, a window into all of Mike's trades. He'll explain what he's buying and selling and expecting and why. I know you'll learn and earn a lot. wallstreetwindow.com. That's wallstreetwindow.com. All right, now, you mentioned Iran there as a subject of the negotiations, and we've discussed over the years how Iran's involvement in this story is, marginal at best and mostly simply mythical. But, a couple of months ago, there was a story that the Americans had attempted to kill an Iranian Quds Force officer there with a drone. And I wondered whether that was even true, that there were Quds Force on the ground there working with the Houthis to be targeted, or what do you know about that?
See, as far as we know, on the ground, there is no single Iranian soldier fighting in Yemen. And at the same time, for experts, it's something that needs a lot of proof. If you mean expert, for example, or a high-profile personality or something like this. But what for? Because it's completely different here than in Syria, in Iraq, in other places. I mean, in Yemen, they don't need an Iranian leader to lead people. It's impossible to believe. I mean, something like this will not be accepted, and it will not be working. It will not be in the interest of Iran. It will not be in the interest of Yemenis. So there is no need for something like this at all. You don't need to rally people. You don't need to bring people united behind one goal or something like this. Abdul Malik al-Houthi is enough, and the government in Sana'a is enough, and the army, and you don't need something like this. But for the expertise, if we talk about expertise, Iranian expertise in making missiles or drones or something like this, this is something that can be done over phones, over in the internet, and there are many methods that can be used to take the expertise and to tell people and to transfer the know-how, technology, or know-how how to do this or that or something like this. But talking about people on the ground, Iranian people on the ground, this is something that is not right. And I myself, for example, I've been with the army and the fighters in many places. I haven't seen something like this. I haven't seen somebody. I haven't seen Iranian soldiers or Iranian fighters, and it will be very funny for anyone. It will be very strange to see someone from Iran fighting here in Yemen. I think nobody can believe even from outside Yemen, because they know that Yemen does not need fighters from Iran. Yemen needs something else. Yemen needs expertise. Yemen needs humanitarian things. But they don't need fighters at all.
All right, now this is kind of a minor point, but I think it's worth bringing up that the news media in the West continually refers to the Houthi regime as the Houthi rebels, even though they seized power in the capital city 5.5 years ago and rule certainly more than 50% of the population of the country are under their control as far as that goes. And but it seems very deliberate, right? It seems like because the propaganda, it's meant to imply that they are still fighting and failing in their fight to achieve power, and that somehow their insurgency could be crushed, when in fact they are the sovereign government of the country, and 5 years of war has completely and continually failed to change that fact. But by continuing to call them Houthi rebels all the time, it really, reinforces this fake idea that their grip on power has not even been achieved yet, or is somehow still tenuous, even though they've ruled the capital city for so long already.
This is the thing that tells you all the story. And when they say Houthi rebels, Houthi militias, Houthi rebels, and all these things, they can't even answer the question, what are you? If Houthi is rebel, so what is Hadi? What is Hadi government? What can you define Hadi's government? Hadi's government is a group of people in Riyadh. They can't even return to Aden, and this is a fact. And I don't think there is anyone who can say that because Hadi is in the papers of United Nations, and his government is registered in the United Nations documents, so he is the legitimate president, and it is the legitimate government. And when you don't have anything on ground, when you don't even control anything, when you can't even return to your airport, the airport under the control of Saudi Arabia, when you can't even stop the airstrikes when they strike your army. I mean, when Hadi's forces were bombed by Saudis and Emiratis. So it's something that it's kind of misleading and disinformation to tell the West that Houthi is just a group of rebels. Mm-hmm. I can tell you, yes, Houthi was not elected. Yes, there was no election, but there was a problem that was known by everybody, and even the United Nations was there when it all started here in Sana'a. So it's not this easy to say rebel and internationally recognized government. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. If it is only like this, they wouldn't have spent 5 years or more than 5 years doing nothing and achieving nothing.
Right.
This is the point. This is the point.
Well, and of course, I actually got in an argument with a friend, a good reporter on Yemen, and a friend of the Yemenis, relatively speaking, who argued that, well, they weren't elected. But Hadi was elected in a one-man election with one name on the ballot. The fact that Hillary Clinton called that democracy doesn't make it so. And of course, Hadi had replaced Saleh, and Saleh wasn't elected either. He was an autocrat, and our government supported him for 30 years. And
yes, Yemenis are still seeking to establish their own government for more than 60 years. So nobody can say he is the democracy and the others are not. No, we are all seeking to establish that democratic state and that democratic nation, and everybody knows. And it's only Saudi Arabia now who is talking about democracy and these things. And look who's talking.
Right.
Saudi Arabia is now teaching us democracy. I mean, this is very ridiculous.
Well, I mean, it is absolutely, and the whole thing about the internationally recognized government there, I mean, all that shows is that the major powers have an agenda here. They want to say that a bunch of guys hiding in a hotel room in Riyadh are the internationally recognized government, but the people who have ruled the capital city for 5 years are not. It just goes to show their bias. And imagine, just shoe on the other foot, that the government of the United States of America is not the one that is created by our Constitution, is not the one that rests on at least the mythology of popular sovereignty from the American people, but the government of the United States of America is the one that's recognized by France and Britain and Russia and China. And if they say that this government is our government, then that's what makes it so, rather than the consent of the governed here in the United States of America. You put it that way for a moment, and any American, all 300 million Americans, would scoff at that in an instant. And yet somehow it's perfectly legitimate for America and its allies to say who's the legitimate government of Yemen. And, I'll encourage people to just Google Hadi election, but then hit image search, and you'll see the ballot from Hadi's election in 2012, where there's just one man on the ballot. And even the BBC, in their coverage of it, they have the quote from Hillary Clinton saying that this is the advent of democracy in Yemen, because America and Saudi chose a dictator for it.
Not only this, Hadi was elected in one-man election, as you said, for 2 years.
Right.
For 2 years, and he failed even in those 2 years. So he didn't do anything. He failed. But his term expired. Then the United Nations extended 1 more year. Then it expired. Then he went into war with his nation. Now it's 5 years, more than 5 years, and you still call him legitimate president? I mean, this is absurdity. This is something that can't be believed. I mean, the Saudi Arabia and its allies who tell there about these things should think of what they are saying.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, for people in the West here, I'm not sure the tradition in Yemen, but supposedly in the West, we have the just war theory of St. Thomas Aquinas that has been passed down since, nearly ancient times, I guess medieval times. And one of the major rules in there, one of the major stipulations of just war theory is that the goals must be at least conceivably achievable. There must be a possibility that you could win and have your way. Otherwise, it's and there are plenty of other reasons to disqualify this war as just. And yet here on the face of it, the goals cannot be achieved.
The legitimacy itself is a relative thing. I mean, if it's not serving people, helping people, doing for people, and being on the ground with people, and all these things. So what legitimacy are you talking about? I mean, so Saudi Arabia is talking for more than 5 years about legitimacy. Where is this legitimacy? I mean, they are just killing people and destroying the country and talking about legitimacy. It's a very silly thing.
Yeah. All right. Now, so I interviewed Scott Paul from Oxfam back a few weeks ago, and he was saying that we're right on the verge of the beginning of the rainy season, and therefore almost certainly the third major outbreak of cholera in Yemen in this war. And that was before the coronavirus hit. Now we have the first case of coronavirus being reported out of there. And I wonder if you can just speak to that. I saw in the news here that the capital city's been flooded in flash floods. So apparently that rainy season has begun now. And I wonder if this is a major concern of yours, that there's going to be another major cholera outbreak there, along with the COVID-19, as they call it.
See, to be honest with you, this is not a major concern. This is a secondary, and even coronavirus, unfortunately, is not that major concern as we are seeing and hearing in the West and Europe and everywhere. It's not yet. First of all, they are taking some precautionary and prevention measures with their smallest possibilities and resources. They're trying to do something, of course, because we don't want this to be here with us, to add catastrophe into catastrophe, disaster into disaster. We don't want this to happen, but we don't have that things. And when we see what's happening in the United States, when we see what is happening in New York, and when we see that the healthcare system in the United States seem to be under-resourced and understaffed and underfunded and shortage of everything. So what we are going to say about ours? We don't have at all. We don't have at all. So we Yemenis don't look to this as a major things because they can't do anything, not because they are not afraid of it, but they don't have anything. So they are trying just to do the small things like washing and disinfecting and the sanitizing and all these things. But for the cholera, it's now rain time. Yes, it's the season of rain, but it's not also a big concern, because the big concern is the blockade and the people being killed by bombs in their houses, by the airstrikes, by the Saudi and the Emirati airstrikes, and also the deliberate starvation, the withholding of the aids in Hodeidah, the withholding of, and also the weaponizing the aids now. United States now stopped its aid because of some misinformation and because of misleading, and because they said Houthi diverted the aids and all these things. And when the fact is that the people of the UN agencies people are here and they can do whatever they want, and but when they see that they know that 80% of the people who need these aid, more than 80%, but this is what they say, this is what UN says, 80% of people are under Houthi. So most of our aid will go under Houthi. This will give Houthi leverage. This will give Houthi influence. This will give Houthi this and that. So we should cut it. And this is what the United States did. They cut the aid because of some allegations that are not true. And this is the big problem. So the big problem is the starvation. The big problem is the bombings and the killing and destroying the infrastructure, not the cholera. Although of course it's a big problem. I'm not just saying it's not dangerous, but there is what is even more dangerous here in Yemen. That is the bombing and the starvation, the deliberate starvation. And using the food of the people, food and water and medicine, as a weapon against the Yemenis. Mm-hmm.
Well, and the World Food Program just announced that they're going to make some major cuts to their aid. I'm not sure why.
It's 50%, half. It's half, yes.
Mm-hmm. And they're saying it's because of funding problems, I guess, was what they told the BBC.
Yes, because it's the cut was about half, because the cut will be from the United States and maybe Saudi Arabia and Emirates, and they're more than half. So, and they said they would cut by half also.
Mm. And then, in Jason Ditz's report at antiwar.com, he says the World Food Program and other bodies are responsible for 80% of the food going to the Houthi-controlled north of Yemen, which is already far too little compared to what the people need. And so
exactly, it's very little. It's very little. Yes, it's not enough, and they know it. But now, if they cut by 30, if they cut by 50, as they said, if they cut by half, it will be even worse. And I don't know how this is going to play out.
All right. So last year, Nasser, the UN said, confirming your reporting for years here, that, and at least 233,000 people had been killed. And I'm not sure if it wasn't the same report, but going along with that was Save the Children and others had concluded that 85,000 of those were children under the age of 5 years old. And that's not all killed in the violence. That's also, I guess, the excess death rate, including those starved and deprived to death in the war. But now those numbers are pretty old, too. And I wonder if you have an update for the totals of individuals, fighters, and civilians killed by the war here.
See, if I about the updates, it's now there are two kinds of updates. There's those who were killed by the bombs, by the Saudi airstrikes, and those, I mean, for this year, for 4 months, for the last 4 months or so. And those who were died by preventable diseases and by malnutrition. I think now they are much more, and we have now statistics about this, but it's not already there. But it's in the making now, because it's they want to make it more exact and more accurate. But I could now tell you from my observation that it's now the Saudi Arabia during these last 4 months, they committed about 4 big massacres. One of them was, I think we reported it in your show, that in which about 40 people were killed. Children and women, just 3 or 4 men in Al Jawf, and they continue doing the same. When they came to Sana'a last week, after the Houthi fired missiles to Riyadh, they came to Sana'a and they bombed many places here in Sana'a, and there were many people who were killed and injured, but not that much. But Saudi Arabia is looking for something to bring Houthi to their knees as usual, but they did not learn from the past lessons. Unfortunately, they every time they do something like this, and it fires on them, unfortunately. So if you want me to estimate the number, it's about 2,000 people who were killed and injured over the last 4 months or so, in all over the country, not in Sana'a or in one place. But for those who died by the diseases and by the malnutrition, there are a lot, and I think the humanitarian organizations know, and they have a lot of statistics, and they have a lot of documents that show all these things.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you saw this, where the bombing by the Saudis of a stable of horses a couple of weeks ago, which is an atrocity, got so much attention. And I bet if you went...
This is 100. I didn't mention this because we are now talking about human beings. But yeah, they killed about 100, more than 100.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of my point, too, is for the media in America, the slaughter of horses captures their imagination in a way that the slaughter of little children never does.
Exactly. It's and even it was even horrible for the people, and the people were more angry even than anything, because they were all alone there, and everybody knows, even Saudi Arabia knows, that it was only the horses, and they came and bombed them. It was very horrible things. But this is what Saudi Arabia is doing always.
Well, all right, let me ask you, is there anything really important that I missed in terms of the way the war is being played out, the situation at the Hodeidah port, or anything else that people really need to know?
The most important thing is this. What's happening in Marib now, the only stronghold of Hadi forces, is now almost sieged from all directions. And it's only a matter of days or weeks at most until it falls in the hands of Houthis. And Saudi Arabia knows this. Everybody knows this. But the later Saudi Arabia, the later it takes serious actions, the more it loses. Because people now, people in Marib itself now are turning against the government, and they cooperate with Houthi because they don't trust Hadi anymore. They don't trust Saudis anymore. You know, most of the so-called national army is not now getting their salaries for 5 months, and they are fed up. They are tired and sick because of this, and this is very dangerous thing. Saudi Arabia want them to fight with its forces, and they don't pay them. This is very dangerous, very, very dangerous. And I think this is the key thing that will help Houthi, because Houthi does not want to enter the city by force. They are trying to just to tighten the blockade and the siege on the city, and be in contact or reach out to the tribal chiefs to figure out a way out, or a way to hand over the city and to avoid the confrontations and killing and destroying. And this is the thing that is happening now.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show, Nasser. I really appreciate it. And again, I'm sorry about what my country's doing to yours. We'd stop it if we could.
I hope you are staying safe and staying home, and be careful about this craziness of the coronavirus.
Yeah, you too, man. Please do take good care, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you very much, Ilda. Thank you very much, Scott. Right. Thank you. Bye.
Yep.
Bye.
All right, you guys. That's Nasser Arrabyee. He's a reporter out of Sana'a, Yemen. He keeps the website. It's Yemen Alan. That's yemen-now.com. The Scott Horton Show, Anti-War Radio, can be heard on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA, APSradio.com, antiwar.com, scotthorton.org, and libertarianinstitute.org.